My girlfriend and I went on a road trip from BC to San Diego, and we came upon a campsite just outside of Crescent City, California. As we drove through, we noticed one side of the campground was relatively empty with just a few scattered tents, but nobody close to the location we ended up picking. We had tons of space to ourselves. We wanted an early night, so I started a fire while my girlfriend started cooking. We ate, had a few beers, and climbed up to our rooftop tent with our dog by 9 p.m. or so. I had a rough time sleeping and woke up a few times, but finally fell into a decent sleep. In the pitch dark with all of our tent windows and canvases closed, I was awoken at 1 a.m. by someone whistling outside of our tent the tune of "When the Saints Come Marching In." After a few minutes of this repetitive whistling, I nudged my girlfriend, who awoke and was obviously freaked out as well. The whistling then turned to chanting things like, "When you sleep here, you disrespect me. And when you disrespect me, you disrespect the U.S. Marines." The person would then start spelling out words like flee. The verbiage and tone kept getting more aggressive, so we decided we had to make a move. I slowly unzipped the tent while our guard dog was snoring and got my head out of the tent. I took a few seconds to let my eyes adjust and figure out where the person was. I felt more confident once I could somewhat see and hear, so I climbed down, and my girlfriend passed me the dog and she climbed down too. We flipped the tent up without securing it, and we jumped in our truck and drove off to a motel in Crescent City. The whistling continued while all of this was happening. The next morning, we drove back to get the few belongings that weren't in the truck, and a family who had been camping a few sites over said it went on for another 2 to 3 hours, and it was the scariest thing their family had ever experienced. I once led a trip to the top of Mount Sterling in North Carolina. It's a tough climb to get to the top, and about 6 miles from the nearest road. I was leading a group of 8 middle school kids and had one co-instructor. We were camping out on top of the mountain, and it was a beautiful night with a full moon. The kids and the other co-instructor went to bed in their tents. I chose to spend the night in a hammock that night. I was really into a book I was reading, so I stayed up and read until about 10:30 p.m. I turned my headlamp off to settle in for the night. Everything around me was rather bright from the moon and from the position I was in. I could see down the trail we had hiked to get to the top. I laid there, enjoying the scenery, and noticed something moving on the trail. Bears are common in the area, so I perked up. As it got closer, I could tell it was a person. We were in the middle of nowhere, and there was someone hiking up the trail with no headlamp or any gear. I was just frozen, watching this person move closer to our camp. They arrived at the top of the mountain where we were and just stopped. I watched as what appeared to be a man survey our camp. I really could only see the outline of him. He stood there for what seemed to be like 30 minutes. He then turned and sat down under a tree facing our camp. He was sitting up in a way that I knew he wasn't trying to sleep. He just sat there, staring at our camp. I had no idea what to do. I decided to wait it out. I waited, just staring at the man while he stared at my camp. This went on until about 3:30 in the morning. Then, he stood up, took a moment to survey my camp a few minutes longer, and then went back down the trail he came up on. I, to this day, have no idea what that was all about, but it freaked me out. I was paranoid that we were being followed for the rest of the trip. I went camping with a summer program when I was 16. There were 12 other teenagers besides me, and we were being supervised by 4 adults. We were having a great time. S'mores, hot cocoa, campfire stories, the works. We all had to be in our tents and either sleeping or quietly awake by 11 p.m. I was in a tent with 2 other guys, staying up later just talking. Typical teenage guy stuff. As one guy is talking, I start to hear heavy breathing nearby. Like someone has just been running and is out of breath. I ignored it and kept listening. I figured I was just being paranoid and hearing things, or that it was one of the guys in the next tent making that noise while he was sleeping. We all then heard, "Please help me," from outside. It didn't sound like anyone in the group. It sounded like an old man out of breath. We all went dead quiet and listened to this guy breathe as he asked for help again. I don't know what possessed the guy near the front of the tent, but he turned on a flashlight and opened the inner flap but kept the outer zipped and looked out. We just saw a pair of bare old, scabbed, and pale legs standing there. It looked like this guy had been walking naked through the woods for some time. He asked for help, but kept standing there. We were all paralyzed with fear, but the guy at the front managed to say, "Keep walking down the trail. A ranger should be around soon." The guy stopped breathing and said, No rangers. They keep me here." It was at this point someone else finally spoke up. A chaperone came out of his tent with a flashlight and cautiously asked him, "How long have you been out here and what happened to you?" The old man didn't answer. He just started sobbing and ran off into the woods. We saw by the flashlight that he was completely naked and emaciated.